take Graham. Take Graham, come on. You might have to listen because Kate's ever so quiet, aren't you, Kate? I can't wait.
Yeah.
Love you.
Famous for saying that I didn't need a microphone at a conference where I insisted that the guy on the platform was a man.
Yes, you did.
Yeah. I want to talk to you about structural oppression and the split between two different constituents of people who oppose trans dogma. All right? Structural oppression tells us that women are oppressed as a sex because we reproduce. We're repressed and controlled and contained by men as a class because of our reproductive and sexual capacity. Now we've gone from a situation of overt blatant patriarchy, which was rule of fathers through religious hegemonies. Is that the right way to say it? So you had God the Father, you had all the various fathers in between, the Pope and various other ones that I won't get myself shot for saying right now, and then in our generation and possibly slightly preceding that, we've had a sort of transmission of that, a change of that, and it's gone over to the brotherhood, and we've seen the sexual revolution, the so-called sexual revolution in the West, which most of us now realise has been oppressive for women, that we've seen a sort of change, a transfer of power between the fathers, the patriarchs, to the brothers, right? And the arrangement is each of these men get to dominate a woman, right? And they share their domination of women, right? But some of the shit is still the same. You've still got classes of women supposedly identified as pure and good and true. That's the obedient wives, mothers, no offence if you're a wife or a mother, don't get me wrong here. And then you've got, excuse me, the whores and those who are prostituted and abused. And that's still the same shit. Now what we've got is we've got a right-wing, religiously informed opposition to the trans dogma that's based on some sort of desire to return us to the patriarchy, where a lot of women, particularly in some outback places in America, for instance, but in other places as well, where they think they had a fairly good deal. You know, if you could find yourself a half-decent bloke who earned enough money and a nice home and everything, you had an arrangement that might lead to a nice life. And then you have, you know, obviously for most of us that didn't work, right? I mean, I'm not telling you anything you don't know. Lots of us discover after years and years that, you know, the guy we married is actually a paedophile or porn sick, or, you know, he divorces us, whatever. Anyway, so, you know, you've got problems with that idyllic scene. Some of us are lifelong lesbians and we're not interested in marrying the dude in the first place, right? But you've also got a left wing then that's grown up and kind of been party to this brotherhood, right? And their understanding is that yes, women are oppressed. Now here's the thing. I remember when I was, I'm 14, looking at Engels, right? What's his book called? Something of the Family. The family, something about the family. I thought, okay, let's have a look at this communist stuff and see what's what. Now, as the goddess would have it, I just opened it at the point, or maybe I looked it up, where he talked about sexuality, and I'll never forget what he says. I can only remember the first part, but you can look it up for yourselves. He said, quote, "When a woman surrenders herself to a man." Now he's talking about sex with men. I've never had sex with men, I'm proud to say. I've no way of talking about what that might be. And I understand some of you have fun, and that's great, go for it. The thing is, I mean, I understand vulnerability and being absolutely terrified and trembling and all that stuff that Sappho's bits of poetry tell us about with desire and intimacy, and I'm probably sharing far too much here, but not surrender. What the fuck is that? You know, that is about power, right? And so although Engels and other radically socialist feminists talk about oppression of women, what they talk about is economic exploitation of women. And you'll see them talk about prostitution as that as well, right? And porn. And you'll see them include in that, as a sort of add-on, care. emotional care, which is of course one of the major things that a woman is expected to provide for her husband. And you know, hopefully we would do that for any of our partners, whoever we are. But it's definitely an expectation when you marry, and men are not expected to really do that. My understanding is for women. So, you know, you've got an understanding on the left, oppression of women as based in the home and in the family as an economic oppression. You understand what I'm saying? And that means that a lot of socialist feminists have never really grappled with what us radical feminists have come to understand as male sexual violence. No, maybe they understand male sexual violence, but they don't understand male sexuality as social control, right? They don't understand the extent to which all of our language and all of our communication is determined by men. I was talking about this with a dear friend of mine just yesterday, and about how the ambiguity about the word lesbian, and you know how difficult it is for women who have previously had sexual relations with men, which is most of you, right, to identify then as lesbian. What's that about? I mean, lesbians are people who come from Lesbos, right? I mean, so we don't have the language. We have woman loving woman, right? Let's hang on to that, right? But we don't have the language, we don't have the culture to adequately express, and never mind envision, you know, what we want, or what, or even really our analysis of the way things are. However, what we do have is we do have logical analysis, and that logical analysis leads us to understand that we have a structural oppression. If we look at each strand of it, of which sexuality is perhaps one, compulsory heterosexuality is one, marriage and divorce is one, child care, reproductive rights, so speaking to some Americans, they don't have maternity leave. They don't get maternity pay in the USA. Can you believe it? Hello? Can you believe it? Women do not have maternity pay in the United States of America. I mean, how bad is that? Given that we're all born of women, right? And that each and every one of us depended on a woman carrying us in her womb for upwards of 9 months, you know. They can't actually, there's no job security, never mind no pay. They just, you know, right? So these are all strands. Then you've got the whole male violence thing. You've got the whole thing about the risk I'm taking here as a teacher, speaking out, right, trying to keep my job, right? You've got all that. You've got, these are all strands of the cage that encases us, right? Now the socialist feminists understand massive parts of that cage. They understand about divorce. They understand about housing. They understand about universal credit. They understand about childcare. They even understand about violence against women. There's lots of aspects of that that they understand. But there are whole other aspects of it that they do not address, right? In my opinion, they're not adequately addressing some of the stuff that has brought us here today, some of the stuff to do with sexual violence and men being predatory. So each of us has come here through one route or another. A lot of us have come through concern about children, for instance. Some of us come through concern about sports, right? Some of us, it's true, have come from experience of sexual violence when we were young, or being prostituted and surviving that somehow. Well done. But the problem is that we've got some women who are coming with experience of sexual violence, for instance, who are right wing, and they're Christian, or they're, you know, fundamentalist Muslim, or, you know, whatever their route in is, and the rest of their politics is really right wing. Now the socialist feminists are telling us that we cannot make an alliance with these women, right? I mean, that's what they're saying. They're saying it is dangerous for women to make alliances with the right wing. And I agree with them. I think it is. I think if we are making alliances with people who want us to have to have kids in wedlock, you know, or people who want to stop lesbians adopting kids, or, you know, I can think of, I'm sure you can think of all sorts of right-wing positions that some of these women would have. They're anti-trans because they know that men are men and women are women, right? But some of their other politics is extremely dodgy, and I agree with them. But you know what? some of the politics of the women, that the women on the left who are aligned with politicians, and their politics is extremely fucking dodgy as well. Like the fact that, you know, the Labour Party in this country, which has just gone down the fucking shithole, hasn't it? But how long has it been there, you know, on the bloody rim of the ball? I mean, they've set up some Labour councils, have set up so-called safe zones, right? Places that are safe for men to proposition women for money, right? To abuse them. Places in, I think, Sheffield and Leeds, am I right? Women have been murdered, right? Women have been prostituted and murdered in those places, right? And it's like, hang on a minute, how come tax and marriage law is important, but prostitution isn't? How come it's okay for us to refuse to ally ourselves with folk who want to imprison women in marriage and make divorce really difficult or whatever? It's not okay for us to identify with them, but it's okay for us to identify with people that want to set up prostitution zones, right? With people that want to legalize whole swathes of pornography, right? Now, I mean, yeah, God knows we all want to have friends and fit in and everything, you know, even I tried to do that. Love you, right? I love you. Right, there's a couple of people I begged them to stay so I could look at them, you know, and you're here, girls. But, you know, we have to, like so many people have said, we have to stand up for women, because if we don't, who will? You know, I was really lucky. I was brought up by a woman who was quite fierce and wonderful in her own way. And, you know, I'm quite old now. And I remember, I don't know how many of you remember, but do you remember when the Shah of Iran got deposed? Right, well, I remember we had a women's liberation conference. There was loads of socialist feminists running around telling us this was a great thing. And because I knew nothing, I was like 19 or something. Scottish, white, you know, what the fuck did I know? Anyway, about Iran, nothing. So, I mean, and I went home to my mum one evening, and I said to her, oh, this is really good, they're having a revolution, and, you know, it's going to be, and she just said to me, do you think this will be good for women? That's what she used to say. And she used to love looking at me, kind of, trying to work it out. And that's what I think we all need to be asking. Do you think this is going to be good for women? Now, this is a single issue campaign. It's fought on many different fronts, right? But it's a single issue. It's about whether sex is an important attribute in law, in policy making, and in civil society. Sex is being completely dismantled, and with it, women's rights are being dismantled across the world, across Europe, and in international treaties and so on that, you know, to which it used to be really important. It is hugely significant for us as women. But it all hinges on the fact that we accept that men run this place, right? And that we are controlled by men massively more than we realise, right? And, you know, the porn industry, here I go wandering off into the fucking porn industry, makes more money than the whole of the fast food industry in North America. Makes more money than the car industry, the automobile industry in North America. Lots of the guys, hopefully not the guys that are here, hopefully not all men, right? Hopefully not all men. But I don't know, right? These guys use this shit. And what are they using? They're getting off on women being humiliated and tortured and raped. They're wanking off to that. Now, these are men that we work with, that we get on the tube with, that we walk past in the street. Now, most of us come to the realization of the mess we're in gradually through our own path. However we come into women's liberation, that's our path. Right? But those of us that are radical feminists are here at the hub. We see the connections between pornography, prostitution, the lack of childcare, the economic mess that we're in. So the fact that we couldn't until the 1970s, I think, get hire purchase in our own name in this country. The fact that, you know, simply prior to that, I think the 60s possibly, we couldn't even have a bank account. The fact that, as you know, 100 years ago we couldn't vote. The fact that, you know, there was still no housing, basically. If 4 or 5 of us wanted to get together and share a house, there's no facility for us to do that. The fact that, you know, these things are all part of the structure that cages us, right? That isolates us, that divides us, and that stops us from being free and happy, right? And we need to see the connections between all these different things and not be divided and not be silenced, right? Why am I speaking here despite the fact I'm a teacher? Because I've just been told that the organisation that runs women's conferences here in the United Kingdom, Filia, right, which I've been a thorn in the side of for some years now, they have decided to exclude the Women's Declaration people from the conference. I've just been told that today. Right? I mean, it's absolutely outrageous. What they're doing is, I've asked them for 3 years now for me to host a platform discussing openly with women from both sides, the pros and cons of working with, or across the aisle as the Americans call it, or with Baroness what's her name in the Tory party or whoever it is here, right? Cross-party coalition work on this single issue campaign, all right? And they have ignored me, as you know they tend to do. Thank you, Posey, for giving me a voice here. But now they've got women's, what they call WP-UK? Yeah. They're having a platform on that, but it's only one side of that, right? It's just the one side, which is trying to say that WOLF, the Women's Liberation Front in America, and the Women's Declaration International, WDI, who do the podcasts every Saturday and so on, that they are, you know, evil basically, because they're undermining women's rights by choosing to work together in cohort, in concert with women who are right-wing. Are you with me? You get me? This is a political issue. You can't stop it from being political. You might come into it from very good motives out of, you know, concern, humanitarian notions and so on, wanting to save kids from all sorts of abuse. Or you might come into it because you don't want your granny washed down by some tattooed, bearded, macho perv. And that's fine. But it is about destroying women's rights as well. And what I'm asking you to do is to consider that the left are guilty of failing to realise the oppression of women on so many different aspects, especially through sexual politics, just as much as the right are trying to drag us back into the Stone Age with their religious fundamentalism. Is that good?
Yeah. We take this. This being interviewed.